Welcome back to the Tux and Tomahawks podcast. I'm Adam Dorito, and I always like watching the blind reactions of people watching my intro video. They're like, "What is this?" They're like, "Oh, that's kind of funny," and you're like, "What is going on right now?" And it's like every one of these innuendos going on in our government right now, all compiled into one. So, shout out to Gen
Nailed
Z
it.
for being super creative on that because I still think it's hilarious to this day. I'm like,
Oh
that's
man,
that's it's pretty good.
dude, that's
I,
an incredible job he did with
I
all that.
I
Yeah,
know, right? I'm like, how did you do this? Like, I'm like,
it's a
I'm like
wizard.
Owen Wilson in like Zoolander. It's like the files are in the computer. Like, oh, it's so simple. Um, I want to welcome on Kegan Gill today, ladies and gentlemen. He is one of the most inspiring stories I've heard when it comes to military advocacy reforms and things that he's dealt with in his life. And he has such an inspiring story. I first heard his story on the White Underbelly podcast on YouTube versus from the Present Fathers podcast when I was out there in Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And just listening to his story it's absolutely incredible and it's literally unbelievable. And I can't wait to tell his story and let him tell you herself. So Kegan, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me on, Adam.
So, you and I have a little bit in common. You have way more jet time than I do. But, I got to sit in the back seat of some single seaters when I thought it was a good idea to be in the Air Force. And it was fun flying around and zooming around. But you're the real deal. You're a real life, true blue fighter pilot, and you went through some crazy things. So tell me about how you thought it was a good idea to join the United States Navy, which is the only branch of service I have not been in. And
Well, technically, you were under
yeah,
the Department of Navy
yeah,
in the
yeah,
Marine Corps.
yeah, the men's department. Yeah, the men's department. So.
I know you guys say that, but we have other men's departments in the Navy.
Yeah, but everyone in the SEAL community is kind of gay, and either they have a book deal or a movie deal. So
Well,
it's.
yeah, I didn't say we weren't gay, but we're
Oh, I
still
love how
men.
this is starting out. This is great. I love the playful banter because get fucked. Yeah. So Keegan, like, what inspired you to join the military? Where are you from? What started this entire journey for you, leading off?
As a kid, I got to go into a little flight program that the local community college offered when I was about 12 years old and go up and rage around in a little flying lawnmower called a
Yeah,
Cessna 152.
great aircraft.
Anyways, that kind of gave me the bug, just kind of being up in the sky, looking down at all the beautiful waters of northern Michigan and just kind of like, wow, this is something pretty incredible that stuck with me. When I graduated high school, I didn't really have any other big callings. I knew I didn't want to be stuck in a freaking office building filling out Scantron sheets or doing mindless things on computers. So I decided to pursue flying. And as a kid, I had seen air shows, the Blue Angels, and all these different performers would come up to northern Michigan where I grew up and perform in the summer. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, but it wasn't actually until after college that I had been flying. I had been a flight instructor through college. I had been a corporate pilot for about a year, flying all over the country. And I had a good gig. And especially considering the times at that point, like it was really hard as a pilot. A lot of guys were sharing a little crappy rundown shack down in Detroit with like 5 other dudes. They were busting their ass at the regional airlines to make like 18 grand a year if they were lucky. So just like,
Yeah.
it was a tough time to be a new pilot going into that industry. So I had a great career relative to a lot of my peers. But after a year of flying around, living this sort of cushy lifestyle, I saw that there was still something more I wanted. There was still something unfulfilled of flying around the country in a brand new aircraft, eating super high class meals, drinking wine, like $500 bottles of wine every night. Like it was a good life, but I was also like, there's got to be more than this. And I had a friend who was applying to go to Navy OCS.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point I was like, well, don't you have to go to the Naval Academy? Don't you have to have some like family ties? Doesn't your dad have to be an admiral? Like you can't just go be a pilot in the military. Like I just
Yeah,
didn't know how it worked.
that's a big misconception because I thought the same thing, right? That's why I went to the Air Force Academy because I thought like, oh, this is how I have to be a fighter pilot. But man, like you understood from the beginning that it's not the only route to go fly jets in the military,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, there's a great website that's still around called airwarriors.com. You can get on there and it's a forum that's mediated by military pilots and aviators. And it's a fantastic resource for anybody who is aspiring to become a military aviator. But I got on there and I digested a ton of information, asked a bunch of questions, and a few months later, I was heading to Navy OCS to get my ass kicked by some Marine Corps drill instructors.
See, that's the proper way to do it.
It is.
Because like after all the branches I've been through, the Marine Corps definitely has the scariest sergeant instructors that I had to deal with at Brownfield in Quantico. Like I'm like, oh
They've perfected that art, man.
yeah, and then like they purposely pick the guys that have really tiny shirts but like 26-inch biceps for some reason, and you're like, you don't like doing dips? I'm like, I don't even know how many dips is it required to have a 14-inch waist and a 26-inch bicep. Gunnery Sergeant, I don't understand. No, I mean that's great, man, and it's kind of funny because actually one of my good friends is Julius Brett, and he was actually number 7 on the Blue Angels for the past couple of years. He just stepped off recently, but yeah, man. I mean, I was kind of the same way growing up. Same thing when I was 12 years old. I had the Young Eagles program in like West Milford, New Jersey, and I jumped into Cessna 152. Same thing, and I was just like, this is great. This is what I want to do, and yeah, I played flight simulators as a kid all the time. Like that's all I wanted to do as a child as well. So what was your experience like going to Navy OCS? Because, ironically, that's the one program I haven't been through.
I showed up very well prepared. I spent the summer prior to going in, going to the gym all the time, racing triathlons. I got really physically fit. And I also, through that Air Warriors site, was able to see like all the information that I should study ahead of time.
Right.
And I very much became like very proactive in my approach to OCS.
That's smart.
And so when I showed up, I was actually pretty underwhelmed at how easy it felt for me. Not to say that they didn't make it miserable at points. I mean,
Sure.
There's still like the chronic stress, and they're constantly fucking with you. And if they can't get you physically or in the academics, they're going to mess with your uniform inspections, which they'll find a way to make you miserable, no doubt.
Oh yeah.
But because I was in good shape and had preloaded a lot of the information for the academic stuff, at least like the military information, rank structures, all this kind of nitty gritty crap that I didn't have to consume a lot of brain power to study while I was at OCS getting yelled at.
Yeah.
It put me in a good place to excel in that program.
No, for sure. So you graduate OCS, and then where did you get assigned to after that? And then how did your selection for your, well, we call it MOS in the Army or AFSC in the Air Force. So I don't know what it's called in the Navy really, but like, how did that whole selection process go through? And what year did you go through that process selection?
So it was in 2009
Okay.
when I headed to OCS. I graduated in February of 2010. But I applied directly to Navy OCS, and the only thing that I put on my designator or desired designator was pilot.
Okay.
You can pick up, I think, 3.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will put several in case they don't get one. But I was like, no, I'm going in to be a pilot or nothing.
That's a bold move because that's not common.
That doesn't mean you're going to like get that. You still have to earn that. But
right.
At least as far as on the administrative side, like that was what I was going for, all or nothing.
So how did you pick up your selection? How did you win your golden ticket to becoming a pilot? Because like I said, especially in 2009-10 frame, because that's exactly the time I graduated the academy, right? And then you had Obama coming in, and then you had the rifts and their force reduction. So the fact that you got a pilot slot like in that year time frame is actually really rare.
Yeah, I applied right before that all started happening, and I had gotten that slot. And then I attended OCS. And as I came out of OCS, you still have to pass the flight physical, which is their gotcha. Is you do a physical at MEPS and all of that before you go into the military. And you think, all right, I'm cool. I'm good. I'm going to be a pilot now. I just got to make it through OCS. Well, there were a lot of guys who had their dreams crushed once they got into OCS and had to do this additional flight physical. We call it the NAMI whammy. Where they'll find any minuscule thing to derail your career. But
can't see the colored letters on the colorblind test page. That actually gets a lot of people, ironically.
Oh yeah, totally. And anyways, I made it down to, it's called Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination in Pensacola, Florida. It's ground school and some survival training that you do before you even class up and start flying airplanes as a student naval aviator. But once I got down there, that was when the news hit that, hey, there's been all these massive funding cuts, and now we don't have enough funding to put through all these student aviators that we've acquired. Mm-hmm. And so it became a bit of a shit show, to say the least, on cutting people from the program extremely aggressively. Normally API, you show up, you just got to get an 80% on every test. It ends up becoming like a drinking evolution in downtown Pensacola for most people.
That's correct.
For the duration. However, things shifted drastically when I got there, because now by the time I classed up, we had to get a 95% average on every academics test or we were cut from the program. And when that still wasn't cutting enough people, they did this thing I call Nightmare Oprah. We jokingly called it Nightmare Oprah, where every morning the ensigns would all show up in our khakis to muster before we had classed up. And so they brought in all these folks waiting to get started in the aviation pre-flight indoctrination courses, show up, everyone's hungover or whatever in their khakis. And they're like, good morning, look under your seat. And people would look under their seat. And if you had a pink envelope, it basically said like, sorry, you've been dismissed from this program. Have a nice day. So, there was stuff like that going on. The morale was abysmal. People were going up after the test to see their grades and being like, oh man, my dreams are crushed. And so you saw a lot of people have their dreams crushed, but I persevered through that and then into flight school where that same, the mesh on the screen got extremely thin because they had only a very few amount of slots. And so they could be extremely selective going through that training pipeline, which made it additionally stressful.
I mean, needless to say, you knew how to fly airplanes then, because like I said, I know what that process is like. I have a lot of friends who went through pilot training, and heck, a lot of my friends now are instructors down at, first year instructor pilot, like they're all FAPEs, right? So they're doing the T-38 Talons and everything else, right? So it's a hard program, especially when you get into those cutting realms within the military, right? Where they're just not pushing people through. And never mind like you getting picked up for fighters, like you didn't get put on a C2 or an E3, you know what I mean? Like you still got to fly jets. So what was it like, finally getting in that T6 Texan? What was it like going, through all that training and like being so competitive in that environment where it was so cutthroat?
Yeah, it was really stressful, but you kind of got used to operating under that stress. For me, my biggest challenge was one, I already had basic aviation skills.
That probably helped a lot.
I could fly an aircraft, I could talk on the radio, but the challenge for me was I had to relearn how to do everything the Navy way.
Style.
And there's still just a tremendous amount of fire hose knowledge that you have to digest and regurgitate. So it was still really challenging. I came in conflict with a lot of the other instructors were kind of, there was a bit of you show up at primary flight training. We were in the T-34 Charlie turbo mentors still back then. They've now switched over to the T6 Texans.
Okay.
But still a very high performance turbine engine, fully aerobatic aircraft. That's a lot of airplane to fly as your first aircraft for folks coming in without any flight experience. But another one of my challenges was having a lot of flight experience and also having the attitude of just being honest and saying, hey, I would like to fly fighter jets. When you're in primary flight training, the right answer, to be politically correct, is I would just be happy to fly anything.
Correct.
I was kind of bold and I was like, well, you asked me and I'm giving you an honest answer. And a lot of the instructor pilots didn't like it when I was saying openly, like, I would like to fly fighters, because they were primarily P3 and helicopter pilots. And some of them had their dreams thwarted. And now they see this baby-faced young ensign come in, say he wants to be a fighter pilot. And that's just like,
they definitely didn't like you.
Off,
They definitely didn't like you.
So I got some additional hell for my honesty. And if I were to do it again, I would keep my shit to myself, just like most other folks did, intelligently. But anyways, made it through that initial cut in primary to select the tailhook pipeline. I then headed to Kingsville, Texas, in the extreme heat to fly the T-45 Charlie Goshawk, little single engine clown jet.
Yeah, a little death machine.
It is, man. Like with all the birds flying around that place and a single engine jet, that if that thing takes a bird, you're punching out. And that happened several times while I was there. People hadn't even gotten through flight school and they're already got an ejection under their belt. But made it through the intermediate phase. You go to a big review board before you select advance, which at that diversion, you can either select or that division, you got to select the E2 C2 pipeline. So you're still flying off of carriers, but you're going to be either flying the carrier onboard delivery aircraft or the E2, which has got the big old dome on top, doing surveillance, which is a significantly less sexy mission. And much of the same stress and hardship that you face as a fighter pilot. But in that selection process, they not only look at your grades and how you've been performing in the aircraft, but even more importantly, they look at your personality. And there's a whole character review and an interview process to make sure that you're going to be a good fit for that community. And so it really came down to me and one of my close friends for that selection. And he got E2C2 and I got the fighter pipeline. But, there's a lot of luck involved when you go into the military flight and training. Hard work helps, push the deck in your favors or stack the deck in your favors. But there's a lot of luck involved too, and the needs of the military. You can be a rock star going through flight school and you get to selection and they're like, sorry, we don't need any of that this time. You're going to fly P3s or P8s or helos. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. But I was very fortunate to persevere and wing May 2012 as a naval aviator. And then I showed up at the F-18 training squadron, VFA 106 in Virginia Beach with wings on my chest, thinking like, hey, I got to have at least a shred of respect at this point. And then very quickly just smash back down to the bottom of the totem pole.
Get back down there. Get back in the fiery water. Shut up.
You still don't know anything. You're still a baby.
No, exactly. So what was it like first getting into that Hornet? Like when you first started doing your training, like what was it like? Oh, I'm actually in the seat.
Oh, it's absolutely surreal. Like the first day showing up at the squadron in at VFA 106 and you walk into the hangar and they've got the Hornets and Super Hornets pulled in there and they're just so massive. Like I'd seen them at air shows as a kid, and when they're way far off, they just look like these little tiny things. Yeah. But you get up close and you're like, these things are massive. And it was absolutely surreal and exciting to see like, hey, I'm going to get to fly this thing. And
did you show up in a polo under your flight suit like in Top Gun? I never understood that. Like I'm like, you go back and watch it later. As a kid, like I watched that movie probably 1,000 times, right? And then I'm like, no one ever wears polos under a flight suit. Like who thought that this was a good idea?
I don't know if that was actually something they did in the 80s or if that was just some Hollywood, nonsense that they threw in, which wouldn't surprise me. There was a lot of that in that movie.
Not very sweat wicking,
No. If you did show up in a polo popped under your flight suit, you would be heading to go be a surface warfare officer really quickly.
Yeah. You're not even going to get the title of snacko. You're not even allowed to make popcorn for the guys or run the flight schedule. Get the fuck off the fucking flight line.
You're disqualified for making coffee. See you later, man. See you later. But yeah, it was, getting to fly the jet for the first time. You do a pretty robust academics portion, computer-based training, a lot of torture in the simulators with emergency procedures and all the things that could go wrong as you learn the systems and become acquainted with the aircraft systems. But then you get in the jet and you get to launch out into the sky and, taxiing that thing around, it feels like a battle tank compared to the previous aircraft I'd flown. It's so big and heavy. And then you get out on the runway and you put that thing into full afterburner and it's blasting 44,000 pounds of thrust out the back of those two engines. And man, it just shoves you back on your seat and you're along for this incredible ride. And by the time this thing rotates and climbs into the sky, my brain's like still back on the tarmac, trying to catch up.
Oh yeah.
And things just happen really quickly. But just like anything, you train to it and the mind adapts. And before long, it just becomes routine in a lot of ways and second nature.
So you finished your training in Virginia Beach for your initial qualification on the Hornet. And then where did you go after that, after you finished all your training?
Yeah, after I graduated VFA 106, I selected VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs in Virginia Beach, a legendary squadron that has a long history dating back to 1950s in fighter aviation. I was pretty stoked to go and join up with these guys. They were just coming back from a back-to-back deployment. So a lot of really salty combat experienced dudes that I got to go under their wing and start to learn from. And again, you show up in the squadron, you're like, hey, now I graduated the rag and I got my wings. Like, am I a real boy yet? And it's like, no,
get back in the fiery water. Get back in the fiery water.
But there, at least once you get to a fleet squadron, there is like an acknowledgement that you are human and that you're part of that family. So that good. Was, a nice breath of fresh air after going on 3+4 years of flight training where you're just treated like a dirty bag of dicks that they're trying to get rid of,
Dirty bag of dicks. Yes. Love it. Yes.
I hope that's absolutely okay to say on this podcast.
Oh, you can say whatever you want in this podcast. Don't worry. The DOD hates me enough. It's fine. There's nothing you can do.
Well, I'll throw some more fuel on that fire for you.
Oh, you're going to. I'm looking forward to it. But first, I want to hear about all the other stories about you throwing fuel on yourself, which we're going to get to. So you're with the Pukin Dogs. You're getting part of the process. And then what was it like being part of Real Fighter Squadron, getting into actual tactics, and actually landing on a carrier? Which, look, to be fair, You guys are the best pilots in the U.S. military. I don't care what anyone says. Anyone who could put a fucking multi-million-dollar jet in the dark with instruments only on a carrier and grab a wire is still like insane to me. So
Yeah, it certainly pushes the limits of your abilities as a pilot as far as the stick and rudder and seat of the pants flying goes. I think there's some really complex tactical stuff that a lot of other aviation communities do that's equally challenging in different ways. But as far as like a stick and rudder pilot, to be able to land on an aircraft that's moving in nighttime in bad weather and turbulent conditions, I don't think that there's a single more complex feat to achieve as a human being, just about.
yeah.
And we would have exchange pilots from the Air Force and services overseas come and fly and train with us and try to go through the carrier qualifications. And I can't tell you that the vast majority of those pilots did not qualify at the boat. It is truly the ultimate test of aviation skill.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you.
But yeah, it was a lot of hard work, a lot of stuff you don't see in Top Gun. Like there's no shirtless volleyball when you show up to your first fleet squadron.
I'm really disappointed in you. I
You're
wanted
not just
one
hanging out at
shirtless
the O
volleyball
Club,
picture.
like picking up chicks and going for rides in little red sports cars. Like there's none of that shit, man. You show up and you are in a vault studying nonstop. When you're not doing that, you're doing your combination of ground duties and collateral duties. You're very quickly assigned, like, hey, you're in charge of this department or this maintenance thing or this. You're in charge of the gi dunk now. You got to buy snacks and stock the shirts and all this. You just very quickly get a lot of shit piled on your plate doesn't have anything to do with flying. That isn't cool or sexy.
Nope.
I was running the gi dunk. I was I was doing the public admin stuff. Public admin or public relations admin officer guy. What's the word I'm saying? Public affairs officer. That's the one. PAO. Yeah. So I was doing that kind of shit. I was coordinating like events for the squadron command, like Thanksgiving feast. Like there's all this shit that you have to do on the sides as part of your job that has nothing to do with flying. And so that was kind of a kick in the ass. Like, yeah, I still got to do ground job shit. And the flying thing, you just kind of fit in on the side almost in your own time. So you're working long hours, you're stressed out, but several times of the week, you get to put on your G suit, your harness, put on your helmet and walk out to the flight line and climb in a $89 million aircraft and go blast around in the sky. And so you get those little nuggets and moments where you're like, I can't believe this is my job. And it makes all the bullshit very worth it.
Oh, for sure. Because I tell people like the military, like, everyone thinks it's a recruiting commercial. And I'm like, that's 1% of my time in the military. Like jumping out of planes, shooting guns, blowing shit up. The rest of it's 99% of the stuff you never see behind the scenes. Standing in line forever, picking up trash, like I said, sitting at the desk, selling merch, just going to this event, making sure the maintenance schedule is on top of itself, making sure, because I was a rigger, right? So it's like all the parachutes are packed and inspected and make sure guys aren't going to die, and constantly doing all these arduous little menial tasks. But they're going to give you a lot of money to go blow this up and go jump out of a C-130 into the dark. Like, all right, okay, so that 1% makes it like kind of cool. So like the biggest question I have for the podcast, Kegan, is how'd you get your call sign?
Oh man. Well, this is a great story and a great segue into some crazy shit. So
good.
Without further ado, January 15th, 2014, I'd been in my first fleet squadron for just under a year. I had played the small mouth, big ears card very well. I had just shut the fuck up, did my job.
Smart.
And didn't stand out in any way, to the point where this morning on January 2014, I walk in to the squadron and one of the more senior pilots in the squadron looks over at him and is, man, you just haven't done anything dumb enough yet to earn a call sign, which I'm pretty sure jinxed me for this day. Another jinxing that morning was I went to get the weather brief from the squadron duty officer. Another pilot, we take turns as that duty officer, as the pilots. And my buddy Fisty's at the desk and he's joking with me. Hey, today would be a terrible day to eject. We've got below freezing air temperatures, churning swell, near freezing water temperatures. And as a joke, he had put up on the whiteboard behind him the airspace we'd be utilizing that day over the open Atlantic Ocean. And he used the Shark Tracker app to put all these GPS tagged positions of all these sharks that have been tagged for research. And it just so happened on this day, there was a 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark named Mary Lee directly underneath the space I was about to go fly in. And so
Nice.
we were joking, this will be a terrible day to eject. And about an hour after that conversation, I'm out over the Atlantic Ocean on a training mission. It's training, but we really push the aircraft to the edge of its capabilities. And while we have a few training rules to keep things relatively safe, and we're not hosing real kinetics off at each other, everything else is as close to the real thing as possible. The whole train how you're going to fight kind of mentality.
Train as you fight. Yep.
So we're out bending these jets around, pushing them to the edge of their capabilities. I'm practicing high aspect air combat maneuvering, or BFM, which is it was about my most absolute favorite skill set in the jet. And this is probably what people who are unfamiliar, this is what you think of when you think fighter pilot.
Yeah, you hit the brakes, they'll fly right by.
Fortunately, that doesn't work very well.
No, it does not.
But yeah, so we're out there pushing these jets. You're bending them around. You're operating weapon systems, radar, defensive systems. You're pulling high G's. You're trying to keep sight of the other craft and try to shoot each other down or get a valid simulator kill in this case. So far, the flight had gone well. We had gotten some air-to-air refueling in, and we had done several rounds of this fighting. And just like martial arts, after you get to a point, you knock it off and you reset and you get another round in. We hit Joker fuel, so we had just enough fuel left for one last fight. And I'm this 28-year-old kid living my dream, flying a fighter jet, pushing it to its extremes. And then something went absolutely terribly wrong. Moments later, trapped in an out of control dive, my jet was blaring. Altitude, pull up. 2 seconds before impacting the ocean, traveling at 695 miles per hour, I yanked the ejection handle between my legs. I then discovered that the human body is not aerodynamic at the speed of sound.
Really? Fascinating.
Believe it or not. My body impacted the sound barrier, which ripped my helmet off my head, caused a traumatic brain injury as my brain smashed inside my skull. I broke my C1 in my neck. My left shoulders, the scapula shattered both my upper arms and the humerus. My right humerus tore through my right brachial artery, causing rapid internal bleeding. My left forearm shattered and severed the median nerve. The spinal compressions actually did damage to what's called the brachial plexus, which is the nerve group that controls a lot of the upper body. So now my upper body is completely worthless. It was such a high speed that I ejected at that the force of that air impacting me was 100 times the force of a Category 1 hurricane. That shredded the survival gear off of my vest, shredded open my dry suit. My legs flailed so violently with the steel-toed boots that they became like maces and smashed open my lower legs, causing 2 open tib fib fractures, loss of bone and blood coming out of my legs. And then very quickly, I plummeted into the icy cold churning Atlantic swell. And as I bled out in these shark-infested waters, things went from bad to really bad. The parachute that had just saved my life then began to sink under the surface. And due to a malfunction in my gear, the SMURFs, these little explosive devices, didn't fire and disconnect that parachute. And as you know, as a PR, a lot of the gear we're working with in the military is pretty antiquated.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work how it's supposed to. And unfortunately, at this point, all of my protection stuff was destroyed. My helmet was gone, my dry suit shredded, my survival gear gone. And now the SMURFs malfunctioned. My beacon didn't operate properly. And so now I'm just a little tiny dark head bobbing around out in the open Atlantic Ocean and getting drug under the surface. And for anybody who's ever been held under the water when you want a breath of air and you can't get it, that's a pretty terrifying feeling. And in just seconds, I'd gone from living my dream to my worst nightmare. And as that parachute pulled me under, I gasped for air and everything went black. 2 weeks later, I'm in the ICU after having been in surgery for 2 weeks. Miraculously, I had been rescued by a Navy helicopter and delivered to a level 1 trauma center where they had been able to reconstruct my skeleton with titanium rods and steel plates and salvage my limbs from amputation with fasciotomy procedures. But I wasn't looking good. And a lot of my squadron mates and family members were in the ICU waiting room, just waiting to hear, is this guy going to be a vegetable? Is he going to wake up? Like, what's going to happen? And it wasn't looking good. And that same pilot that just before this flight kind of piped up, and who said I hadn't done anything to earn a call sign yet. And he said, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be all right. And that kind of lifted the mood of the ICU waiting room. And so the clever gentleman at the Puking Dogs took Scrappy Motherfucker, because there's no way the military is going to approve that and put it on the side of a jet these days. Although in the past they probably would.
In the past they would have, not now.
But so they took that and they shortened it down to SMURF, a makeshift acronym for Scrappy Motherfucker. And then for the politically correct cover story, it's that I'm a short guy that turned blue from hypothermia.
Which is probably what saved you. I mean, to be honest. And just thinking from because like I said, I'm a parachute guy. The fact that fucking chute opened and did not explode into confetti is a testament to your rigor. Hopefully you bought him a case of beer. But that's wild, man. And what I don't, how far were you off the ship when you punched out?
So I was operating out of NAS Oceana.
Okay, so you're off land base. Okay.
There was an aircraft carrier that was within about 25, 30 miles of my position that had actually sent the first rescue helicopter that showed up first. There was a miscommunication between their rescue swimmer and the search and rescue effort. And so they ended up not getting me first, which actually was a blessing, because had that first rescue swimmer gotten me, they had been instructed to take me back to the aircraft carrier.
Oh shit.
Not realizing the extent of my injuries. And had I been taken to that carrier, I wouldn't have been able to be treated.
They don't have the resources on that ship to do what you were dealing with.
So I ended up spending more time in the water waiting for a second helicopter that actually found me a little later, but they actually got me back to the level 1 trauma center, which
gave you some more vasoconstriction to stop your blood loss in that ocean.
Yeah.
A couple questions I have, just because this is for anyone who's doesn't fly or understand this process, this is insane. He should be dead. There is no way that he should have survived this. How did they find you? So I'm like you said, your dry suit got torn, your chute's pulling you under. How are you? Did it end up you being able to disconnect it somehow, or it just did not pull you under enough? And then how were they able to mark you in the ocean to find you? Because your beacon didn't work. How the hell did they get you? You know what I mean? Because that's hard.
It was miraculous.
It's like a needle in a haystack.
My flight lead that I had been fighting for training on this flight, he spotted my parachute opening. Mm-hmm. He was able to drop a GPS mark of my position in his aircraft. However, because I was caught in the current, that spot was moving very quickly move. And he was literally on fumes remaining in his jet as he's coordinating this on-scene commander role to get the search and rescue underway. And just before he bingo profiles, does a divert profile back to Oceana to land on fumes, he spots a fishing vessel about a mile from my position. And he tries to get them on the maritime guard, the emergency frequency. They're not answering. So he gets down really low and really fast, and he thumps over their bow, which perks them up real quick. They realize, hey, we should listen to the emergency frequency. Something's going on. Mm-hmm. And through that, he's able to direct this fishing vessel over to my position.
Got you.
He gets them pointed in the right direction, giving them that coordinate. And then he does a divert profile back to Oceana. At this point, there's several more aircraft high overhead trying to spot me using their long-range infrared cameras, which at this point, all they're able to see is the ocean waves. I'm just a little tiny dark head.
Yeah.
No one has visual on me, but this fishing vessel at least is able to spot me and get over near my position. They initially throw ropes out to try to get me, but
it
adds to the problem.
Yeah.
But they at least provided a rough location for where I was at as the rescue effort unfolded. And had that fishing vessel not gotten there, had my flight lead not thought so quickly, there's no way they would have found me.
No, there's no way. And I think you ejected at 695 miles an hour, right?
Correct.
So I think prior to you, if I remember correctly, I think it was in the early 90s, but the highest speed ejection to that rate, I think it was 500 something miles an hour, but it was the F-15E Strike Eagle out of Lakenheath, and it killed his Wizzo, and I think the pilot survived, broke his arm. Same thing, he was out in the ocean up in the North Sea or whatever. And that was in the dark and shit. So I still don't understand how you tacked on another 200 miles an hour to that.
Yeah, he was actually faster and lower than I was when he ejected. That pilot's call sign is Noodle. Mm-hmm. That was in 1989 out of the Strike Eagle. But yeah, it killed his Wizzo, and miraculously he survived that. But a very similar experience and profile that he punched out at. But I think he still holds the record for the fastest overall ejection that's ever been survived.
Did your training just kick in to like you had 2 seconds, you had to pull that handle? You know what I mean? Like, was that just an instinctual reaction? Because I mean, there's some pilots who would just do, controlled flight into terrain at that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it was very instinctual at that point. Right before I pulled the handle, I had this temporal distortion of time where everything just froze.
Interesting.
And I could see the white caps. I could see like all the ripples on the water, and everything was just frozen for a few moments where it just felt like time had stopped. And after that, that was my last linear memory, and my training had just kicked in. I don't even remember assuming the position or pulling the ejection handle. It was just completely instinctual. But the overwhelming effect of that ground rush as you're approaching the ocean so rapidly was like, there's no way I'm going to get out of this at this point. So there's no other option. And instinctually, I just yanked the handle.
Yeah. So the 99% boring bullshit of, reading your manuals and sitting in a box and constantly going over training, like this is what it's built for, right?
Yeah.
Is to have that instinctual reaction to try to save your life or save equipment or whatever else it is. And did they recover any parts of the aircraft? They just let it sink.
It vaporized upon impact. The largest pieces that they were finding in this thing were like the size of a crumpled up license plate. It was just gone.
I was like, did you get a little piece to save for yourself to mount on the wall? Like it sounded
No,
like...
I wish I had, but everything was kind of scooped up by the investigation process and kind of kept off limits.
So did they ever figure out whatever happened to your aircraft, why it went to an uncontrolled dive?
Yeah, it was a combination of factors. Firstly, we had set up in a way that kind of put us in a dangerous situation that got my flight lead in a little bit of hot water. He kind of set us up in a non-standard fight setup that was lower and faster than recommended by the Top Gun manual for a standard, what we call PADS, position, altitude, distance, and speed. All would have been good. I came to that merge, but then I had just been qualified with my Gehemix helmet, which is this really cool helmet where everywhere you turn your head, all the displays go with you. So you can use your weapon systems and see your flight information. Really cool. But just like any piece of new equipment, even once you're qualified with it, it takes time for that to become intuitive.
Right.
And I wasn't quite proficient enough for this gear to be intuitive. And so it served as a momentary distraction as I came to that merge. As I'm thinking about the fight and all the other things that are going on, as you're getting bombarded with all these, hundreds of different information points that are coming to your brain and lighting your brain on fire. I missed the fact that I had gotten so high at airspeed in the merge. And so I made the mistake of rolling inverted and doing a nose low maneuver at a higher than Top Gun recommended airspeed.
Interesting.
Now, had that happened at a higher altitude, I would have been fine. And typically the Super Hornet can do a vertical maneuver like that in less than 5,000 feet. And we have the saying in military flight training, which is live by the gouge, die by the gouge. Oftentimes you're given so much information that you have to kind of condense it down in what we call the gouge, which is like the cliff notes of that information as you're trying to grasp it. And so I had that little bit of gouge data in my head. Oh, I got more than 5,000 feet above the hard deck. I was at 10,500 feet when I initiated that maneuver. So in my head, I'm like, oh, I got more than 5,000 feet plus a 500-foot bubble. I'm good to go. Let's go. But that saying, live by the gouge, die by the gouge, went towards the die by the gouge, because to make matters worse, another piece of the puzzle was as I hit bullseye nose low, pointed straight at the ocean in the jet, I had accelerated to a point that the aircraft hit what's called the G bucket. And the aircraft thought that there were bombs on the wings that weren't actually there. And so it limited how aggressively I could maneuver the aircraft as I hit that transonic region, which was, had any one of these things happen individually, it would have been fine. But it was the combination of all these different factors coming together that caused the mishap. And, I had to go through a very extensive investigation after the mishap.
You have to show up in your whites to a board, just like Pete Mitchell.
Yeah. It was maybe slightly less dramatic than that. But after months and months of investigation, I did show up in my summer white uniform. I was still walking around with a cane at that point.
Yeah.
And at this point, it didn't even look like I was going to ever be physically capable of getting back in the jet.
Yeah.
But I sat at this board to decide my fate. Was I going to get to keep my wings and still be a naval aviator, or was I done? And honestly, it was up in the air big time.
No,
They,
and
they
this
could
is
have gone either way.
and this is crazy because so my first degree at the academy was like human factors, and like a lot of the things you talked about really resonate with me was that human machine interface, and limitations. And what I find interesting was that the aircraft thought it had bombs in the wings, so it was limiting your ability to do things because of a programming issue. Did they rectify that in the Hornet program after that? Did they go through some, because of lessons learned from your incident? Did they go through and try to correct those things in the aircraft?
Yeah, sadly, this wasn't the first time this had happened that caused a serious mishap or killed a pilot. There had
Interesting.
been far more capable and experienced pilots than myself that had the same system kick in and cause them to die.
Hmm.
I know a pilot after me who was at the pinnacle of his career, a Top Gun graduate, extremely proficient and capable on a low-level flight, and this insidious system kicked in, and he smashed into the side of a canyon wall with little to no warning of why his aircraft decided not to turn. Most other Generation 4 and Generation 5 aircraft all communicate between the ground proximity warning system and that G limiting function, so that if it detects a pending collision, it overrides and allows you full control authority. Or some aircraft, even like the F-22, I've heard if that's in a dive, if the pilot's incapacitated or whatever, if it detects a pending collision, it'll pull like 10 Gs to pull
Yeah.
out of the pending collision all on its
Yeah.
own. Unfortunately, that link wasn't made in the Super Hornet for whatever reason, probably related to funding in the developmental process. But the Super Hornet, that feature still remains. Something that they did do is they made it so that you can see and modify the loadout from within the cockpit.
Mm.
You used to have to do that from a panel that's in front of the right engine. And I had done a hot switch on my flight, so I didn't get a chance to open that panel because there's a running engine right there. You don't want to open it and FOD the engine
Right.
when you do a hot switch. But they rectified that little piece of it. My recommendation was that we had a simulator where you actually put yourself in the situation and then you learn kind of the cheat code to override that system. There's a paddle switch on the base of the stick that you can hit and it'll override the G limiter function. However, we never would train to that. In fact, it was kind of like, just don't touch that button when you're flying. It was something that we used, for some tactical purposes. But other than that, we weren't ever trained like, hey, if you're stuck in a dive and the jet's not responding, you can hit that and save yourself. So I hope that becomes part of the training curriculum at some point. But I sat at the end of this boardroom table with the admiral on the other side and flanked by dozens of naval aviators that were highly experienced, capable humans to decide my fate. And the admiral walks in and we all stand up out of respect. He tells us to sit, and I sit at the end of this table just like, what's my fate going to be here? And the admiral looks across the table at me, and the only thing he asks is, Lieutenant Gill, are you fearless? And like, what do you say to that? Right?
Yeah.
But the only answer that came from somewhere within me, I don't know where, was, sir, I don't remember a lot from the ejection, but I'm certain what little seat cushion there is was puckered up inside me real tight. And he didn't laugh. He didn't smile.
Impressive.
He didn't anything. He just stood up and walked out of the room. And I was like, oh shit. So I'm just left in this room with all these other aviators who are like, what just happened? And eventually things start to clear out. And one of the more senior pilots, a Navy captain, grabs me and pulls me into his office and sits me down across from him. And he opens up this glass container of Lifesaver mints and he hands me one and he pops one in his mouth. We're sitting there sucking on these peppermints. And he goes, Lieutenant Gill, if you can get your body working again, we're going to get you back in a Super Hornet. And that was just like huge inspiration for me in my recovery journey. I'm literally still walking around with a cane at this point, but over the next several, it took 2 years in total from the mishap, but I was able to
Yeah, I
get
was
a
going to
stack
say,
of medical
what
waivers.
was that recovery process like? Like you broke everything in your body. You should be dead. You're rewriting flight rules for the Hornet now, pretty much, because you lived to tell the experience. You didn't die like a lot of these other people have. Like, what was that recovery process like just to get you back in the jet? Like, was it harder, do you think, than your initial flight training?
If I had to choose between going to the RAG, VFA 106, and going through that training pipeline or having to recover from being paralyzed, I might choose paralyzed because that is a brutal training
Yes.
process.
That's
But
funny.
it was physically grueling.
Yeah.
There was a ton of nerve pain that I was dealing with, which at any given moment of the day, randomly, it would feel like someone was either crushing my left foot, lighting it on fire, or electrocuting my leg.
That's a good time.
And it was spasming all the time. And so I was dealing with some severe pain issues from that nerve damage. And that was excruciating. They had me loaded up on tons of pharmaceutical pain meds. I lived in a poly trauma center run by the VA that just had shitty food, shitty sleep all night. They're waking you up to take your vitals and give you meds so you can sleep, which is completely nonsense.
Yeah.
Probably the foundation of what you need to recover is good sleep, nutrition, some exercise, and getting outside and getting fresh air. And unfortunately, those things were few and far between in this rehabilitation center. But eventually I got through that and continued. Fortunately, I had a background in fitness growing up and being an athlete through my life. And so I just kind of applied the same discipline, although it was incredibly frustrating to go from somebody who could, do some serious weight on the bar to I could barely manage picking up a bar without any weight on it at this point.
Yeah.
So I had to reset my standards, but I just stuck with it consistently. I stuck with my therapies consistently. And as time progressed, I got better and better. But it was a long, grueling, brutal process of going through the investigation, of getting my body back, overcoming prescription drug addiction to all the pain meds they had me on.
Oh, yeah.
And then going through the bureaucratic nightmare of trying to get all these medical waivers was another layer that I had to navigate.
Yep.
And I think that might have been the biggest miracle of all of this was I got medical waivers to go back and fly. I ended up, after 2 years of all that, I was able to max out the Navy's physical fitness test. And I went back to flying Super Hornets as an active duty pilot.
So, I mean, you get all this stuff done, you get back to flying, but that's not the end of your story. Because, I mean, honestly, the first 48 minutes has been really fun talking about being a fighter pilot and being some kind of American hero, punching out of a jet, breaking your body, coming back. And, it sounds like a 1980s action movie. You know what I mean? Where you got the training montage of you punching a side of meat, in a barn
Rocky
somewhere.
Style.
But this isn't where your problems ended. This is actually where your problems started.
Yeah. This has been a fun story so far, but the challenges that I was about to face made all this past stuff look like a cakewalk.
Yeah, that's why you're really on the show.
Yeah. So let's get into the good stuff now.
Yeah.
If that part wasn't entertaining enough for you. I'm back flying. I had been back flying fighter aircraft. I went back through the training squadron at VFA 106. I had excelled in my retraining. I graduated at the top of my class, getting the top stick award. I got the River Rat Award, which means I was also the most fun to hang out with outside the cockpit, which I'm actually more proud of that one.
That's definitely a prestigious award.
I headed to a new fleet squadron, VFA 136, the Nighthawks, and kind of just picked up running and going with it. But little to anyone's knowledge, including my own, I still had this unresolved brain injury from the ejection that largely went unacknowledged. And as you added the stress of being back in a fighter squadron, not sleeping, pulling G's, landing on carriers, all the G forces that, cause more damage to your brain, as we're finding out, that started to take a toll on me. And, you're constantly burning the candles at both ends, not getting rest on the weekends when you should be, and typically out drinking. And that's just kind of part of that culture, or at least it was. And it took a toll on me. And I started to have trouble with things that used to be easy. My memory started to struggle. I started to require more and more caffeine to keep myself going in the day. Started using snus pouches to try to give myself a little more focus when I studied. And then that meant at the end of the night, I needed to have some drinks to help wind down. But in the end, I wasn't getting restful sleep. And it started to irritate the physiology of my brain that was in need of healing and rest. And then I had an incident in the aircraft that had become kind of a common issue with the Super Hornet and Hornet community, especially, was the pressurization systems were having these malfunctions that were causing random fluctuations in cabin pressure. And I came back from a flight and I didn't quite feel right that night. I couldn't really sleep. I was feeling really nervous for some reason. And the next day I just tried to tough it out, but I was just getting worse and worse. And so that night I cried uncle when I sat down on my bed and the whole room tumbled around me from vertigo, which I had never experienced. I was trying to do the math just to set my alarm clock on my phone because I had to fly in the morning, and I
Right.
couldn't figure out how to operate an alarm clock on my cell phone. And so I realized that there was something seriously wrong. I contacted the squadron safety officer, and the first thought was, hey, you've likely had a decompression sickness event. There's type 1 decompression sickness where you get these little bubbles in your joints. Scuba divers will get that if they come up from depth too quickly.
Yeah, the
But
bends.
the same thing can happen in the aircraft when there's a rapid pressure fluctuation. Just like when you open the cap to a soda bottle or a beer bottle, the way it fizzes to the surface, that can kind of happen as your blood depressurizes, only with the nitrogen coming out of solution. And if those bubbles come out of solution, they can trap in your joints, which is painful, type 1 DCS. But if you get those in your brain, they can block the blood flow to your brain, causing like aneurysm-like symptoms, like you had a stroke. And, you know, the brain needs oxygen in blood, and if it's not getting it, it's bad news. And that has killed other aviators before. And in my case, I was fortunate to be rushed to a nearby dive base in Mayport that was about 20 minutes from where we were on detachment on that day at Tyndall Air Force Base down in Florida. And I was put in a pressure chamber overnight and squeezed. And while I felt a little bit better in the morning, I was still not quite right. And so the recommendation was, hey, you need to go see medical when you get back from detachment, which as a military aviator, that's the last place you want to go.
Right.
Because you know that that's likely going to cause a negative impact on your flying career. But I got to the point where I knew something was so serious that I couldn't just tough this out anymore, and reluctantly went in to see the flight surgeon when I got back from detachment. And pretty quickly, I just got a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis. They didn't recognize the brain injury component, the fact that I had this disrupted physiology within my brain and nervous system that needed to be addressed. And instead, it turned into talk therapy and take these pills, which was incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
And the pills were given to me initially. I was given a medication called quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic, but it can be used at low doses as a sleep aid for persistent insomnia. And they thought my main issue was I couldn't sleep. My nervous system was so elevated all the time. I was just constantly in fight or flight, like let's punch somebody in the face mode, that I couldn't shut down to rest. So they gave me the quetiapine, which kind of shut that system down, but it puts you into this sort of drug-induced stupor and you're not getting restful sleep. And so that masked the symptoms for a while. And before long, the same thing that happened with the pain meds in most pharmaceuticals is you need more and more and more. And as I took more and more of that stuff, my life unraveled. Pretty soon after, I became unrecognizable to my wife and to myself. My flying career sort of slipped away along with my sense of purpose. And late one night, I sat in the bed in the middle of the night and reached for the pistol that I kept right next to the bed. And as I pulled that thing out, I was wondering what the muzzle's going to feel like on my teeth, what the gun oil is going to taste like on my tongue. And as I go to put my finger on the trigger, I look, and my radiant wife and my newborn baby boy are sound asleep beside me. And I didn't want to wake them up. But that was the only thing that kept me in that moment from joining the 22 to 44 veterans that are taking their own lives each day, dealing with this sort of issue.
Yeah.
Eventually I was medically retired, and I continued that same treatment through the VA, which was more problems, more pills, more pills, more problems in this vicious cycle. My wife came home. This is within a couple days of having my dosage of quetiapine increased from 300 milligrams a night up to 450 milligrams a night, which is like a heroic dose of this shit. And it wasn't working. She came home and she found me instead. It had exacerbated my issue. I was completely naked. I had shaved off my hair in chunks, including my eyebrows for some reason. And I had a black garbage bag tied around my neck like a cape because I thought I was going to go fight crime out in the snowy weather, dressed like naked Batman. And instead of fighting crime like a superhero, I ended up spending the next 40 days and nights locked in an inpatient VA psychiatric facility where I witnessed and experienced firsthand truly abysmal care of American veterans. There were so many parallels to the way that you were treated as a prisoner of war to being locked in this facility. The sleep deprivation, malnourishment through terrible food. You're not hardly ever to get to go outside. You are dressed like a prisoner in prison scrubs, while the staff members wear white lab coats. So you get the Stanford prison experiment dynamic going.
Yeah.
It is not a healing environment. And I had truly become a prisoner of the war on mental health that is raging beneath the veneer of our civilization currently. I eventually became lucid enough that I tried to escape the facility. I'd been voluntarily admitted. I hadn't committed any crime. I hadn't been violent. I just checked in as an American veteran that wanted to get help for injuries incurred while serving honorably. And instead, I was held captive. I was not allowed to leave when I saw that this was not the place to heal. I was drugged against my will. And when I tried to resist that medication and actually try to get out of the facility by pulling the fire alarm and escaping when they let us out for the fire, which they didn't do. Instead, I got forcibly injected with a medication called Haldol that should just be called hell.
Jesus.
Because when you get that shit put into you, it feels like insects are trying to rip their way out from underneath your skin all over your body.
Yeah.
It made me extremely restless. All I wanted to do was rip my own skin off and run and scream at the top of my lungs. So yet another traumatic, torturous experience instead of getting any sort of help for my trauma. It was just compiling onto it. A couple days later, I think it might've been the next day. I really don't know at this point. I was in such a stupor after they injected with me that and who knows what else. I came to in a room with this individual that was supposed to be my legal representation. And they had put a pen in my hand and they had me scribbling on these documents to, I guess, sign my name, which I couldn't even sign my own name. I was literally drooling on myself from all the drugs they had me on. And yet I'm somehow binding myself to these legal documents that committed me to the facility so I could no longer voluntarily leave, which I already couldn't, which was kind of fucked. But now I was like especially fucked. It stripped me of my Second Amendment right to bear arms. It also put me on the law enforcement information network as if I had committed a crime. And so eventually, with the advocacy of my family, I was able to get out of that facility. But when I got out, I was just a broken shell of a human in a drug-induced stupor. And every gift around me felt like a burden. I could barely do the dishes. I couldn't read. I had gone from a high-functioning, capable, loving human to just this empty shell. My little boy would come up with me and ask me to play, and I would just push him away and tell him to leave me alone. I had like the only emotion that I could feel was this deep sense of betrayal and rage and just persistent anger. That's just all I felt all the time. It was miserable. I wanted to end my own life. And I was very fortunate to come across a network of remarkable veterans and nonprofit organizations that helped me gain access to healing modalities that actually helped to heal the underlying condition, the brain injury.
So this is a fascinating parallel to the things that I deal with directly in DC and with the VA and mental health. It's the exact opposite, and I'll explain that in a minute, of your situation, but they're 100% completely related. Like for me, what had happened is I reported sexual assault misconduct and the cover-ups of these incidences at the Air Force Academy on behalf of this 3-star general who's protecting the football team, right? But they didn't have anything on me. Like look, I'm from New Jersey. I'm kind of an asshole, right? It's not like I made so many friends from the Midwest out there, in Colorado. But in general, I was like to Tony Soprano. I was like, hey, fuck you. You're doing the wrong thing. And I reported these things to the chain. I used all these processes and everything else to try to do it the right way, whatever I knew how to do at 21 years old, right? And at the end of the day, they tried to give me an Article 15 for like fraternization because I was investigating these lower cadets with like OSI, which is basically NCIS. But at the end, I didn't commit a crime. I didn't do anything wrong. So they removed me from the academy, after graduation. They withheld all this stuff from me, long process. But in 2017, after I'd gotten back into the Army, I was in special operations for 2 years. I found out that all the kids that we were investigating and the way these generals made this entire situation go away, unbeknownst to my knowledge, my commander directed a CDE, which I don't know if you experience a command-directed evaluation with your mental health stuff as well towards the end of your career as well. But it is a very dangerous power that the military uses to destroy your life using mental health, right? And what they did is they went in and they falsified my mental health records and said I had 7 major psychological conditions, even though I had never been to a psychiatrist, nor saw a medical professional at all on behalf of my commander, who was not a medical professional, who somehow had access to my medical records when I wasn't even in the Air Force or the military at the time. Come to find out that I got out in 2010 off active duty, right? They went in and changed my records in 2011 when I was a civilian without my knowledge. I came back into the Army in 2015, and I didn't find out until I was going to go back and be an Apache pilot for the Army in 2017, right? So I started this whole federal lawsuit process and everything else. Come to find out in 10th District Court, we agree your constitutional rights are violated. No one should have access to your medical records. They illegally falsified your records, but because the military is a separate society and should be treated as such under Parker versus Levy, this court cannot tell the military what to do. So what I've seen, especially with your case and so many other veterans that I've interviewed about this issue, is that the military will use mental health records, whether accurate or inaccurate, in order to push their own policies to protect themselves, right? And what they did to you is not only inhumane, it should be illegal, right? But because it's tied to the military and this whole VA system, is that you can't tell them what to do. Like, this is not the type of treatment you would receive on the civilian side or alternative care methods. I even interviewed another veteran, Casey West, who had stage 4 brain cancer after getting depleted uranium poisoning in the Marine Corps. Same thing. He went through psychotic episodes. He had to go through decompression. He had all these issues going through. And the VA just wanted to do the same thing. Pump him full of pills, make him crazy, make the situation even worse, exasperate his injuries when all he wanted was real human treatment. But the military, it almost seems as if it is easier for them and cheaper for them to make you want to start a shotgun in the parking lot and for you to kill yourself, because at the end of the day, it's cheaper for the system for you to go away and be a self-resolving problem than actually start taking care of our veterans, accurately reporting medical information, and not violating your HIPAA rights, which they tried to take away from you when you're a member of the military, right? I mean, this destroyed your life to a point where, like I said, you were a good person. You were top stick. You were a fighter pilot. You're a loving father and a husband. And now they're literally trying to get you to self-remove yourself from the system because you created such a problem for them, having a lawyer come in, illegally having you sign documents that would further confine yourself, and taking all these medications and everything else. And that's how our cases combine. And this is why I was so inspired by your case, is because, like, look, I was just some cadet who ended up trying to go to the Marines, had some jet time, and ended up being a salty NCO and now officer in the Army, right? But, like, this isn't the only story I've heard about this. This is a continuing problem. Through the entire global war on terror for the last 20 years, what we've learned is that the military has put its service members on a pedestal to the public where, oh, military members can do no wrong, right? Like, there's no evil people in the military or the VA system or these veteran care systems. Like, we have to respect their decisions and not question their motives and what they're trying to do. But here's the thing, Kegan, you survived the system. You're here talking to me on this podcast today as someone who has greatly recovered from the situation you're in, and I'm still sure you're fighting with still a lot of issues internally over this. It's not over, but now you're publicly and advocating publicly about how we need to change this system, how we need to demand that our leaders have the courage to command in order to fix this. So what happened to you, or what happened to me, or what happened to hundreds and thousands of other veterans, that this never happens again, that we're demanding real change in our system.
Yeah, it's a frustrating process because, the VA system is largely controlled by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yes.
I've talked to the leadership within the VA, and they're just as frustrated as that you and I are. And a lot of the physicians trapped in the VA bureaucracy are just as frustrated. But at the end of the day, the policies that the VA employs are dictated by the pharmaceutical industry because they have effectively control the VA system. And of course, the pharmaceutical industry's primary obligation is to increase the value of its stockholders' share each quarter. And that is their baseline. And that same problem has been causing issues throughout our entire society in so many different industries. But it's very well alive in the pharmaceutical, in the healthcare space. Is the business model of healthcare has now taken priority over the health of the people within that system. And the way that the pharmaceutical company sees it is, how do we get these patients on more of our products? Because that's how we make money. The government gives us money for our products when we get them on all these veterans. And they don't want a product that's going to fix you, because then you don't need their products anymore. They want something that you have to take every day for the rest of your life until you, like you said, remove yourself from the system. And now we don't have to deal with disability
Exactly.
for that individual. And
Exactly.
I think there might be a hint of that in there, I don't know that there's like an evil mastermind behind all of this, but there certainly is the human greed of these industries that profit off of the sickness. And we have the defense industry, we have the military industrial complex where we've seen like, here's something good. We do need national defense.
Right.
I signed up to help defend our country because I love our home, where we are and what we have and the rights that we get. However, that has been transformed. A good thing has been transformed into something that makes money by causing destruction, because they make money off of not only making the weapon systems and the bombs and all of that, but they also make the money off of rebuilding these places after we destroy them.
Correct.
Companies like Halliburton. And so you've seen this business model kind of supersede the actual need for defense in many cases. So we're not out there fighting just wars to stop evil. We're out there making profit for these contractors in defense industry, folks. And the same thing is happening with the medical industry, except the medical system is an even bigger industry. It dwarfs the money that the defense industry is taking in. And with 100%. That becomes more clout, more influence, more financial capability. And they're doing a lot of the same things to propagate their own industry, to make a very few people more and more rich. It's the oldest thing of human history, this greedy path, just destroying ourselves effectively.
100%. And this is actually how I ended up getting involved in politics, because I'm not a huge fan of anyone in politics whatsoever. If it was up to me, I'd slam the gates closed on my 12 acres of land on the independent Republic of Dorito and just leave me the fuck alone. Because like you said, man, it's I've lost friends in combat. I've been overseas. I've spent time in a war zone. And when you really see what's going on, especially in CENTCOM, especially like I was an intelligence analyst and we were working on Reaper drones and airstrikes, and you see all the young 21-year-old kids hooting and hollering about blowing people up. And then when you realize like that was the wrong guy, then, or he had a family, or you watch 2 5-year-old kids fighting over a bag of flour in Syria and just eliminating each other with AK-47s, right? Like, and then the problem is that we glorify war in the United States, and that they don't understand the human toll. Like, they've never been on the ground. They've never seen this type of suffering in real time. And then, and like I said, you and I have both worked on multiple presidencies, right? Like I started with Bush, and then I had, Obama, and then I had, Trump, and then I had Biden, and now Trump again. And it's great. But like we swear an oath to the Constitution. We don't swear an oath to any individual person, right? You try to be a moral and ethical officer or an NCO or a soldier or whatever it is, and try to do the right thing all the time, but here's the issue is that I always tell people, you have 2 choices as a citizen of the United States. You can either be a citizen or you can be a resident. We could talk on this podcast for days, Kegan. We could talk about all these things to exhaustion. But at the end of the day, you and I can't physically change the policies and sign those pieces of paper. The pen is mightier than the sword. That's how I ended up getting involved with the America First Veterans Association out in D.C. And it's all full of GWAT guys like you and me who are sick and tired of the VA abusing us. We're sick and tired of sending our young men and women to go die for foreign special interest wars for the pharmaceutical companies, for the military industrial complex. And we're trying to find young millennials and Gen Zers who want to actually go run for office, whether that's the lowest level, whether it's your school board, or whether you want to run for senator or whatever it is. Because what I have learned is that the same geriatric fucks, pardon my French, who have sent us to war for the last 20 years are still trying to control the system. And I think that was part of why people got inspired by the second Trump administration, because the first one, he got hindered. He wasn't able to do anything, and I'm not saying I agree with everything that he does, but the point was like, all right, we're bringing in like RFK to like make America healthy again. We're going to try to like do alternative medicine and try to change how sick and destroyed our society is from the pharmaceutical companies and the food industries and all these other things that are not allowing people like you to have access to the actual care that you need. Same thing with Casey West, when I had this very similar discussion with him about these things, right? And now you're seeing in real time, and this is like really recent news, it's like, all right, then we're going to drop 14 GBU-57s with B-2 bombers through Iran, and now we're starting this whole circus over again. I was over there right before Gaza kicked off. We even warned it was going to happen beforehand, and now it's turning into this multi-year absolute catastrophe. And now we're shifting focus to this. And then you look at the big, beautiful bill, this huge thing they're trying to pass and everything that's going through. And if you actually read through the whole 938 pages of whatever else it is, there is so much pork in this bill that is business as always. It's just another omnibus spending bill that is not helping you, Kegan. It's not helping reform the VA. It's not getting the changes that people like you and I who have, younger families or we're the next people to take over. It's business as usual. And what I see is disgusting, especially with a lot of the politicians here in Colorado, and I've seen it in other states too, like New York and Arkansas and everything else, is that these people who have been in power for decades, who have been running the system, are now just trying to wait this administration out. They know if they can put full stop to it over the next 18 months, that they can go back to business as usual in 2028 and start this entire circus again to the pool of useful idiots who get involved in elections, and it's up to people like you and me to actually go initiate those changes. Because like I said, you can write all the letters you want, Kegan. You can make all the phone calls you want. You know what that's going to change? Fucking nothing. It's not going to change anything. That's literally why I'm going out to DC here in 2 weeks again to start lobbying for issues. And that's why I'm actively calling and finding other veterans to go run for office. Like, I don't know how to run for office. I'm like, well, let's start with tailoring a suit and going to Men's Warehouse. And like you and I, we're very knowledgeable about these issues. We can go and talk to a group of people or on a podcast about these issues when a politician can't even talk about what color the sky is. You know what I mean? Like, they are a bunch of useful idiots. Like, I'm sorry. I mean, there's some good ones out there. I've met some good ones, like Wesley Hunt. Love that guy down in Texas. He's trying to do the good, do all the right stuff. But it's the only way you and I are going to be able to change the VA is we have to infiltrate the VA. Like, this is turning to a Sejodath mission, right? Like, we have to put the people in power that are going to allow people to use alternative medicines like psychedelics, or stop putting people on drugs and stop making them wear Batman capes made out of plastic bags. But like I said, that's what they want. They just want you to go away. They just want you to go away.
And I think the machine wants you to be miserable, afraid, and broken, because now you're easy to control and you just become another consumer, another sheep. But you and I both know we refuse to be that. And I agree. Like, we are the ones that have to fight for this change while we can, while we still have the right to do that. And a way that we can fight for that change is just talking about this stuff.
Yes.
I think with your podcast and podcasts like this, we are in a very unique time in human history where this kind of information can be disseminated and people can hear the full story and actually get an idea what the fuck is going on. Media is no longer controlled just by some handful of folks, which I think is helping to change the tide in a big way, is bringing this up to a public awareness. And really, I think the solution for a lot of us is just to look at how we live our lives individually. Mm-hmm. How can we live in a way that no longer makes us dependent on this broken system? And the more that we can shift towards, being more self-reliant, living on our little farm or whatever, and eating the food that we capture ourselves or grow ourselves, we're no longer going to need the medicine because we're eating healthy food.
Yes.
We no longer need to be dependent on a broken food system. And I think there's a shift happening in that direction. More and more people are getting interested in this way of health.
Yes.
And living and well-being that is going to help to bring down this monster of a system.
And they don't like it. They'll do whatever it takes to stop you from doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we already see the information suppression, the demonizing of the players that are simply trying to make kids not be so damn sick. We see a lot of old school dirty propaganda coming out to try to crush people and make the stuff sound like it's something that it's not. But I think more and more people are seeing through the bullshit and the lies and seeing the truth, because there are so many podcasts and experts where you can sit for a couple hours and it's like having dinner with an expert in that field and hear the full story that's not edited. And there's a lot of value to that. So I'm hopeful that things are going to continue to change. I think there is a wave of change occurring right now. We're definitely in the early stages of it, and all the old establishment is holding on for dear life to the way things are, because that's how they get their money and that's what they're used to. But we're going to wash those old boogers away before long, man. We're going to just keep flushing. And before long, it might take a generation, but we're going to start getting more people into those positions that see the truth. and hopefully keep taking this to the right level. And the lobbying that you're doing, I was just in DC last summer as well. You might have even been there lobbying for the MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD.
Yep, I was out there during the same time you guys were. I was lobbying for like the mental. So like the bill I'm lobbying for is the Military Mental Health Justice and Protection Act. That's something that I wrote myself, that I've worked on with several people over the last 7 years for. But one, you need to let me know when you're going to be in DC next time or whatever, because I wanna join forces with you. Because you and I have the same mission, just on different venues, and that's how we're going to get these bills passed, right? Like that you are an American of action, and you're doing the hard work, and people don't understand. Like, yeah, DC seems scary, and there's all these other people. Nah, not really. When you start walking into office and you start having these one-on-one conversations, and you realize that like the power is very centrally controlled, it's just getting public awareness, right? Because you have a great story. It's very inspiring. So do I. Nobody cares. Right? You need to get 100,000 people to start making angry phone calls in order for them to start actually wanting to write this stuff into law. And at the end of the day, what I tell people is like, if they're not going to do it, well, then you need to do it. Like you're up in Michigan, right? Is that where you still live out there?
Yeah, that's correct.
The Midwest emo scene. Love it. Hot Mulligan and the rest of them. Yeah, but I mean, like, worst comes to worst, Kegan, like, I might need to put you in a suit and start, parading you around with America First and be like, we're going to run this guy for Congress because no one else wants to do the job, apparently. Right?
That's a ball of wax I don't want to get into.
I know. And that's exactly why I need you to run, Kegan, is because you don't want to run. It's a conversation I have with a lot of vets. It's like the people I want to be in office are the people who don't want to be in office. I want you to go in there for 2 years, do your duty, and walk the fuck back out. And just like George Washington said, go back to your family farm and take care of your family and your country, and let the next generation of Americans take over. Because
that's what our political system is supposed to be.
It's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to
be the common people come in, serve a couple years, and then go back. Not these career politicians that just camp out there their entire lives,
right,
and do no good for anybody, who lose perspective, who are from this managerial class of wealth that is disconnected from the vast majority of our country.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's who's largely influencing and controlling decisions.
And it should largely be like kind of like your career in military service, right? You come in at the lowest level possible, you work your way up, you train, you do your job, you serve your contract, you get out. And then your job while you're in is to make sure that the generation coming up to replace you, after you decide to hang up your uniform, is just as well trained and capable of continuing the mission as you were, right? And I think that's the way the model of Congress and the Senate needs to be in the future. Is like you come in, you do, you have term limits or whatever else, but you are training and inspiring the next generation of Americans behind you who are going to be raising the kids and paying the taxes and furthering the next generation to come in behind you. Because if we have a bunch of 80, 90-year-olds running Congress, I mean, you're setting up generational laws and generational failures for people that are going to be around way after you're dead, right? Yeah. I mean, this is what we're dealing with now, and this is why I tell people, hey, go read what they're trying to pass, and if you don't like it, say something. It's okay to say something. It's okay to actually call your representatives. It's all public information, right? Because we are never going to fix the VA by just complaining about it. You're going to fix the VA by forcing people into a corner and demanding an answer. Hey, you ran and said that you were all for the veterans, the farmers, the ranchers, the oil and gas workers, whatever. What are you doing about it? Are you going to sit around and talk about ICE and illegal immigration for the next 20 weeks? I don't care. I care about making sure that my guys that replaced me are being taken care of, that the potholes are getting filled, so to speak, right? And you're not doing that. If you're not going to do it, we're going to find someone else who can, right? Because you, like I said, you have to be a citizen. A resident just sits around, shits, eats, takes their kids to soccer practice, and complains on Twitter. But a citizen understands, just like in the military, like all the dumb stuff you have to do, standing in line forever, you have to put some time, effort, and sacrifice, and time, money, and treasure into making sure that our constitutional representative republic continues in the future. Otherwise, we're just going to turn into some giant socialist, government-controlled, warmongering, sick pharmaceutical inspired state. And I don't think that's what anyone, especially in our generation and the generations coming up behind us, want anymore. I think we're done with it.
Apparently a lot of people do, though, which is crazy to me.
Well, I mean, look in New York, and I know you gotta go, I know you have a time crunch here, but and this is what I warn people of from a psychological operations perspective. I'm in civil affairs. This is what I do, is that when you have the same exact people, like the reason why Andrew Cuomo failed so hard in the primary in New York is because he sucks And it's the same recycled 20, 30 politicians all the time. Even in Colorado, it's like, oh, we're removing this representative. Well, we're going to put up the same exact guy we put up last year, and you're going to vote for him now. It's like, no, how about somebody completely different? How about Barney the dinosaur? How about my dog? My dog would be a better solution.
Like, those people can't get in. I have a friend who was trying to run for the political system in Colorado, and because he didn't align with the establishment, he was.
Oh, who is he? Because I'm very interested in, because I'm very involved in Colorado politics.
I'm going to leave him. I'm going to leave him out of it.
Yeah, tell him to contact me in the background. But like, was it the most recent election system that happened?
No, I think this is a little while back.
Okay.
But
yeah,
he basically had the machine come after him. He was trying to crush him and his family. Like
100%.
They were playing so dirty. And bullshit. And like, man, if the system doesn't want you to be part of it, they will extract you. So it's extremely difficult to get into the political system as an honest, hardworking person with a different viewpoint. And even once you're in, man, like what I saw in DC was the decisions didn't even come down to the lawmakers. It's coming down to these unelected bureaucratic weasels that work behind closed doors. And that's where the real decisions are being made. It's not being made through the people that we elect. So it's frustrating to say the least.
I 100% agree with you. And that's what disenfranchises people like you and me or the younger generations to run for office, because you see it so broken. Like, yeah, just like your friend in Colorado, because I'm fascinated to know who this person is, because I'm like I said, I'm very involved in the system, and I know how corrupt it is. I know the 5 main leaders in the state of Colorado who control all the votes, and they whip everything around, and it's what they say. So what I do is I just openly make fun of them. Like, I show up to their meetings and I just say, so what are you going to do about this? Well, you suck. And then I'm like, well, if you can't do 25 push-ups, then why would I even trust you to make one decision about my future benefits? You know what I mean? I'm like, I am the farmer and the rancher. I am the oil and gas worker. And yes, I'm an Army veteran and an officer. You're none of those things. Like, you want to go out and fight in the parking lot? Like, I just start doing Talladega Nights quotes. And they can't pick up on it. Like, I'm going to take your mother out for a nice steak dinner and never call her again. And they're like, how dare you? I'm like, you don't even know what Anchorman is. Like, you shouldn't be running for office if you can't do Will Ferrell quotes. Like, get out of here. And you'd be surprised at how easy they back down. But no, I understand, like, whether it's you starting as a precinct committee person or a state central committee person, like those small offices that are very influential into who we pick our legislatures with, right? Like, that's a lot of the work I work on. But like I said, is it hard? Yeah. Is it impossible? Absolutely. And are they going to come out and openly attack you and go after every little thing, every parking ticket you ever had? Yeah. And then I sit there and go, and now what? Now what are you going to do? I sit there and take it on the chin. I sit there and go, yep, I want you to come after me and my family and my dog. I want you to keep doing it. And you know what I do? I keep showing up. I just keep showing up, and that's my message to guys like you and anyone in the veteran community that I work on these stuff was like, keep showing up and keep annoying them, because you know what they're gonna do? Nothing. You're a goddamn F-18 pilot. What the fuck are they gonna do, Kegan? You know what I mean? Like, I'm an Army Civil Affairs officer, and I manipulate foreign governments. Like, what are you going to do? Like, I'm just going to continue making fun of you openly, telling you you're terrible at your job, and I'm going to fight for every single veteran who has been subjected to your maniacal wars for the last 20 years to make sure that I don't send my future kids off to die in a war that you sent my friends to go off and come back in a box for. It's just not going to happen. And you know what? If I'm successful, great. And if nothing changes, you know what? Then I'm going to continue talking on podcasts and raising my chickens and my bees and sitting there and bitching on the internet, because, I mean, what else can I do? You know what I mean? But like, it's like that famous quote, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing, and I want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing and your advocacy. You're so well spoken. You got your story down pat. And as a podcaster, I truly appreciate that, because sometimes you talk to guys and they can't tell their story because they're like squirrels, like everything's running in the crowns in the corner. No, and I want to maintain this friendship, and I know I randomly reached out to you, and I'm so happy that you actually messaged me back. But I want to join you in a force for good. I want to help you in every bit of your advocacy that you're doing. Anything that I can do to help you in DC, please let me know. And like I said, keep up with that Midwest emo crowd as much as you can, because that's the music that's going to save America. I can't tell you how many terrorists died, listening to Hawthorne Heights, so to speak. Right? It's just
dude, I don't know anything about the Midwest emo scene.
You don't? Oh, dude, you got to look up Pop Mulligan. They're from like your hometown. That band from Michigan is actually controlling the entire Gen Z population in the Midwest right now. No, I'm dead serious, and it's really funny. They're just talking about how much like the government sucks and how much like they don't have any money, they can't go to college, they can't do this. They're doing it all through music, and they're pissing off a lot of 20, 30-year-olds. And I'm like, good. It's a good psyop. But now we're going to use your music to now overthrow the government legally. You know what I mean? Like, all you got to do is crowd surf a guy in a banana suit. Next thing you know, we're taking over a few seats in DC, and that's exactly what we need.
Man,
right?
I'm glad that they're pissed. I'm glad.
Oh, they are pissed.
Generations are pissed. They should be.
But because when they listen to stories like you, Kegan, they go, "Fuck, I don't want that to happen to me." You know what I mean? Like, hey guys, look, the government tried to destroy our lives, right? Like we tried to go in, like I was a 9/11 kid, like, you were, same generation as me. We tried to go in and do all these good things, and look what they did to us. But if we can speak out about all the corruption that's going on and try and learning from our mistakes and what we saw in the system, we're trying to map this out for future generations of like what you can do to make that change and what you can do to inspire the next generation to do this, and like what you can do to remove these people from office to make sure that what happened to you or what happened to me or what happened to anyone else can never happen again. But it takes action, it takes participation, right? I mean, like, yeah, like they're gonna try to elect a Democratic socialist as a mayor of New York City, the largest, who has no experience, has only been a citizen in the United States for 7 years. And you want to know why they're going to elect him? Because they're so desperate for radical change because of the old broken white geriatric system, like Andrew Cuomo comes from, that they will take anything other than him. And that's scary, right? That they're willing to take anyone other than the establishment. So like people like you and me we need to become the new establishment. Like, we're rational people, we're veterans, like, you know what I mean? We're not trying to overthrow the entire Constitution like some of these people, but that's why you see some of these radical progressives, and nothing against them. Like, you're an American, you can believe whatever you want. But when you have like, Ilhan Omar and a couple of these other people coming in saying, well, we want to rewrite the entire U.S. Constitution, like, full stop, that's when we have to take a responsibility to come in and do the right thing. But if no one good runs for office, they're going to elect the most tasteful thing in their mind that's going to give them the change that they crave so much, that's not embedded to some kind of destructive system. So I hope people listen to your story, Kegan. I'm going to spread this around as much as I can. I'm going to repost it, all my stuff on Monday, to inspire people not only by your story of resilience and heroism and your struggle with the system to just be a father and a husband and an American warfighter, but to demand change from everything that we know in order to make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone ever again.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, man, it's inspiring what you're talking about here. No doubt we got to keep fighting. It's
I mean, what, you thought I was just going to let you come on here and tell a story without enacting change? Get the fuck out of here.
I dig it, man. Yeah, take action. Yeah, if you're looking to learn more about my story, please check out my book, Phoenix Revival: The Aftermath of Naval Aviation's Fast to Survive Ejection. You can get it on Amazon, hardcover, paperback, ebook, and on Audible. I do the narration for it. It's been a bestseller on Amazon. It's got great reviews. I think you'll dig it. There's a lot more to the story we didn't get into today. And if you're looking for help going through your own issues, I'm a coach. I help people dealing with brain injury, mental health ailments, or just people that are, trying to make positive change in their health goals. So reach out to me. My website's kegangill.com. And another thing I just want to talk about really briefly before I go is what's called the ARC Health Foundation. It's an organization I'm affiliated with. We're basically a group of veterans who have been through this broken medical system, and we're trying to rebuild a new medical system to send veterans through so that they don't have to struggle the way like I did and so many countless others. Like you've been abused in ways too by these systems. But ARC Health Foundation, if you're looking to support a worthy cause, please check out their website, ARC Health Foundation. We see the health system as just a broken mess, and we're going to rebuild it.
That's such an inspiring, and like I said, thank you for being an agent of change. Thank you for being a veteran who's actually going out there and trying to fix the system versus just complaining about it. You are one of the real ones. I am honored to now call you an internet friend for now, so to speak. I will come find you in the future. I promise. I will find you. But yeah, check out those links in the description. When this posts, and go follow them on Instagram. Get in contact with us, and let's be our agents for change. And this has been the Tuxes and Tomahawks podcast, and hang out for a minute after we close out. But thanks
bet.
for showing up today, guys. This has been such an inspiring story, and it's I'm proud to call SMURF one of my friends now.
Thank you, Adam. Likewise.